Perinet winery is located in the north of Spain. It's in the Priorat growing area. We are in Sanchez vineyard. This is one of our favorite vineyards. It's planted in Garnacha, Carinena, and a little bit of Syrah and Merlot. And we make Perinet, our core blend here, made mostly with the traditional grapes, and it's a very classic style. So I choose those grapes to make this blend, my favorite blend. Perinet wine is a very ripe wine, has a very wide range of aromas because it's peaked very late in the season, and also the tannins are very ripe, very velvety and very soft in mouth. So it's a wine that you can keep in bottle also for 10 years long. The best pairing for Perinet, it's red meat, but also with truffles and chocolate.
A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows, and a warm welcome to the Westin Palace Hotel in Madrid, which may help to explain why this week's show opened with a beautiful section of a part of the wine world that certainly as South Africans, if you are watching from South Africa or as a South African abroad, you might not have recognized. Surely if it's wine from Spain, it must be Rioja. That's where they make wine in Spain, isn't it? Well, actually, there are, I think, 138 different designated areas of wine growth in Spain, and the one we celebrate today is not Rioja. However, it does have something in common with Rioja. It is one of only two that has the same top-end classification, and our guests today will be explaining that, explaining where exactly in Spain they are, and why it is one of the most exciting parts of the Spanish wine story, and why there is a bit of a South African connection. We've had a few South Africans, some of them rather well known, who found their way into this particular region. So what is the region? Where is it? Who's making the wine? Well, Antoni, the winemaker, and Sheri, the CEO at Perinet, our special guest today, will be joining us in just a moment to explain why their wine is so exciting, what the story of the wine region in particular, the winery, so the wine region in general, the wine region in particular are, and then taste three wines that have been sitting after very kindly dropped off by Brian from Perinet yesterday in my hotel room, looking invitingly at me. And especially after last night and watching the football in Madrid, it was very tempting to open at least one of them. But I've hung on to today and I'm really excited. This was me last night at El Clásico, watching Barcelona take on Real Madrid, which was absolutely electric. Full house. And when Jude Bellingham scored the winner for Real Madrid in extra time, the stadium went berserk. It's one of the most extraordinary sporting experiences I've had. I think the heart rate is still trying to come down after that night at the Santiago Bernabeu. I first visited the Bernabeu 15 years ago when I was hosting Champions League football on television in South Africa. It was off season though, and I didn't get a chance to see the game. Well, what a way to make my debut at the Bernabeu and kick off a really important couple of days of sport. The Laureus World Sports Awards are in Madrid this evening. As an ambassador for Laureus, I am here for a few days. I shall be there this evening, be on the red carpet, and then through into the actual awards. Madrid as a city is one I love. Laureus is a very special space for me. That was some of the filming we did yesterday. The great All Black captain Sean Fitzpatrick and South Africa's own Academy member Brian Habana. Both of them enjoy a glass of red wine, and that was us in the build-up to the awards. You can see Madiba's image in the background there, and this will be the stage a little later on this evening. My good friend Andy Garcia is over from California. Is he? No, he's in Miami at the moment. Anyway, he's over. He's going to be hosting the awards. And that's the reason why I am in Spain for a few days. And I thought, well, if I'm in Spain, I might as well talk about Spanish wine. So a lot of fun coming up on the show today from the Westin Palace Hotel in Madrid, ahead of the Laureus World Sports Awards that kick off very shortly. I'm straight off to the red carpet from here. Catch them on Supersport tonight. Again, if you're watching in Africa, those will be shown live at 8 p.m. South African time. Preceded by Dan Really Likes Wine with Norman Goodfellows. So let's kick into it. Before our special guests from Perinet, let's have a quick look at some of the latest wine news. what I love about this event, and it plays out every single year, is it brings together some terrific champagne, some really marquee houses, alongside some of the best of South African Cup Classiques. You can compare South African bubbles with the best of French, and generally I think we hold up pretty well, but also the chance to discover new Cup Classique. And there are every year brands that I'd never heard of that suddenly arrive, and I try rather skeptically, and then a small smile starts to form as I discover there's yet another little bubbles house that's produced something remarkable. And I'd imagine there'll be a few more of those at this year's event. So if you're in Johannesburg that weekend of the 18th and 19th of May, get your tickets at Web Tickets. Daryl and team would love to host you for a fabulous celebration. The news of a restaurant in Bree Street. What, a restaurant in Bree Street? Never. There are only 8,000 of them at the moment, and they're going to be a couple more and one less, if that sounds a little cryptic. Well, Liam Tomlin is closing down the Bailey. He has 2 brand new spaces opening up, as well as a performance entertainment space. It all sounds very exciting from a chef who bought us places like the Chef's Warehouse initially and has been a real fixture on the Cape Town food scene. And all of his restaurants always have an admirable wine component. So look out for another addition to Bree Street. If it wasn't hard enough already to decide where to eat on Cape Town's definitive food alley, well, thanks to Liam Tomlin, it's just got a little bit tougher. And then mark in the diary the 30th of April. That is the next Norman Goodfellows wine tasting at the Superstore in Fourways. This time it is Springfield, home of Life from Stone, but home of so much more than just their iconic Sauvignon Blanc. They've got a wonderful selection of reds. A couple of them, they put a lot of time and effort into keeping in barrel and then in bottle until they release. And also their wild yeast Chardonnay, which is a great example of using yeast in its most natural form to create a wine that, not unusually for Robertson, gives us a Chardonnay that is quite exceptional. So expect some lovely wines to try. That will be the team from Springfield, 30th of April at Norman Goodfellows. Look forward to seeing you there. All right. Well, welcome to Madrid. Welcome to Spain. Thank you for joining us. And a very special welcome to 2 guests I've been looking forward to chatting to for a few days now, ever since we confirmed that we would be able to do this. And I have to start with an apology, Sheri, because you very kindly offered to bring me down to the winery and to come explore it firsthand. Sadly, I'm not able to make it as much as I would have liked to. It's not far out of Barcelona, where I met my wife, and subsequently she was daft enough to say yes to my proposal. And so romantically, it's got a very special place in the Nichols story. But also, it's just such a beautiful stretch of the world. Not one, though, Sheri, that many South Africans will immediately recognize as being a wine area. So give us a little introduction, if you will, to exactly where you are and why this is such a special part of the Spanish wine growing region.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us today, Dan. It's a pleasure. And I hope, obviously, with maybe a 1-year anniversary, you'll be able to come to the winery and have that celebration. So hopefully that will happen. Perinet is it's approximately 1.5 hours south of Barcelona. We're about 3 hours from the border of France. So we're basically in the northeast part of Spain in Catalonia. So it's very close to Barcelona, easy to access from the Barcelona airport. Priorat region is one of the smallest regions, wine producing regions in Spain. And as you mentioned before, us along with Rioja are the 2 DOQs of the region. So very important regions to Spain. We have approximately 120 wineries in the Priorat region, so quite small. Total production of about 3 million bottles a year. Perinet, our production is anywhere between 50 to 70,000 bottles a year. So the winery is 25 years old this year, so it's a nice celebration. This project, where Tony actually joined the winery back in 2015, it's 10 years really since the start of this project. And the great thing is the wines that we're going to be tasting today, the Perinet, you'll be trying the 2016. The first blend that Tony actually created of this was the 2014. So you'll be able to taste some wines directly from this region and from the heart of Perinet.
I'd like to dive down, Tony, into exactly where we find you and why it's so good. You guys have the equivalent status to the Rioja region, which South Africans will know a lot better. Explain what that status is, what it means, and why what part of the world, the part of Spain where you make wine, is just so conducive to making such good quality.
Hi, good morning, and also welcome everyone. Well, in fact, Dan, in Priorat, wine is made from the rocks and after the monk. So we should do something to just tell the world that this is high-end quality. And then it became a denominación de origen calificada, like just to explain how to make wine from the rocks. So this high concentration, low yields, all this crazy juice turning into wine. This is what it comes into a denominación de origen calificada, as you said, together with Rioja, the only two in Spain. So it's very strict, the way you have to grow, they control the yields, they control the amount of wine that it comes out of the press, they control almost every other day where are the grapes coming from, which plot. You have to identify. Traceability is something at the very, very top of a DOQ. And then this turns into a really nice product that, as I said, it's really made from the rocks. And when I say from the rocks, it's because Priorat is well known for having old vines, and these vines struggling where the roots, they're very deep attached into the soil, and it's the soil is this type of licorella, what we call it licorella, which is common people would say is late, but Priorat people, which is a little bit crazy, they use their own words for everything, and they don't even speak Catalan, they speak Prioratí, which is a kind of dialect that also makes this area very, very special. So yeah, that's a little bit how we became like a DOQ. So it's very strict, very nice wines, very full body, very pronounced aromas, and well, if you've never been here, you have to be here.
You are perhaps ever so slightly subjective, Tony, because this is not too far, if I'm not mistaken, from where you grew up. Tell me a little bit about coming into the wine world, about why this area means so much to you, and how you found yourself in the wine industry, Tony.
Well, I was born in the Pyrenees. My parents were raising cows, and I was actually tasting the milk from every batch. And milk smells different depending on what cows eat. If they eat the flowers and the grass, or if they just eat, more in winter, they have to get processed food. So then I moved into the chemistry because I wanted to get rid of all these kind of, rising cows, agriculture, all these. I said, no, Tony, you are going to be amazing in a lab, 8 hours a day. This will be clean with air conditioning and all this. So then I moved to Barcelona because I wanted to study chemistry. And in fact, I studied. When I finished my degree, then I got a grant. I went to Germany, again, in a big industrial way. And I was mostly working on shampoo for your hair to make your split ends looking amazing. And then I just came by chance into a Jägermeister tasting in Germany. And then I said, well, Tony, you can work on a chemistry, something related to aromas or blah, blah, blah. So I'm not really coming from the wine industry, but then I just came just by chance, like when you fall into the hell, I fall into the wine. And then I said, wow, this is another world. This is another dimension that I can apply chemistry, and I can develop my insight. So you can yourself can be projected into the wine, and this is the most amazing thing. So then I came back to Tarragona, then I went to Bordeaux, and then I couldn't stop. When you work in wine. It's really the feeling. It's yourself in a bottle. And then when I came to Priorat, and I promised myself that this shitty, dry area full of cactus, and I said, Tony, what are you doing here? Your green grass fields in the Pyrenees, like you should not be in this dry, almost arid area. But then making the wine, then I realized, wow, this is my place. And there's a legend that's coming from the monks that says the Priorat either attracts you forever or it rejects you forever. And I think that's the explanation why I'm actually still there after 22 years. So that's it.
I love the fact that somebody whose tasting career began with milk somehow found himself making shampoo and then got inspired by Jägermeister, and now you are a winemaker. But this seems to be something of a habit at Perinet, arriving in wine from slightly unusual points of departure. Tell me, Sheri, how a Canadian in IT ends up in a northeast corner of Spain in the wine industry.
Well, my story is not as exciting as Tony's by any means. I can tell you that right now. Well, I've actually been in the wine business for 30 years. I'm kidding. I've loved wine for many years. And as you say, Dan really likes wine. Sheri really likes Spanish wine. So that's basically why I'm here. I came over to Spain, to Barcelona 16 years ago, actually. I was working for a high-tech company. I've always had a passion for wine. The first time I actually came to this region, I had the joy of actually having a tour of the Perinet winery with Tony so many years ago. And I fell in love with this region. I fell in love with Perinet, and here I am today.
Clearly loving it and having a great deal of fun, but also creating a space that is gaining a lot of fans, gaining a lot of interest. I've chatted to one or two sommeliers while I've been in Spain, and I think your particular region is obviously very well known here, but it's a brand that is gaining traction. Before we jump into wine itself, give us a sense of the wine industry in Spain. We face our own challenges in South Africa, and I've got no doubt there are some here. How healthy is the wine industry in Spain, and how are you guys in particular doing? What are the big challenges? What are the things that are going really well?
So overall, I mean, the Spanish wine market is actually doing quite well right now. As far as Perinet, we actually have been exporting about 90% of our sales. So between the US, also throughout Europe, Benelux, Nordics, UK are some of our key markets, also to Asia. So our export business is going very well for us. Also from our direct-to-consumer, we have an amazing tourism team here at Perinet. We actually offer visits on a daily basis, 7 days a week. Our tourists are able to enjoy barrel tasting, where we actually take them through the winery. We give them a tour, and they'll be able to taste the new vintages directly from the barrel. Also, we can do a classic tour, and people can taste the new wines that we have in bottle, etc. So our tourism is going very well. We host quite a few corporate events, also weddings, and celebrations, as you were even commenting, anniversaries, etc. So we also host those type of events at the winery. For us, that is a very it's very positive for us. The growth in that area is fantastic. We've also have a lot, this region has grown a lot as far as tourism. There's a lot of new hotels that have opened up in the area with Westin Bruno, Ora Hotel. We've got El Palouet and Terra Dominicana. Great partnerships with each of these hotels. So the region is really becoming a lot more known. As you mentioned at the beginning, everyone knows Rioja, then they know Ribera. I think Priorat is becoming very well known, great restaurants, great hotels, and this really brings the international community to our winery to experience what we have.
And this is exactly why it's sitting very high on my to-do list to come and pay a visit. It looks beautiful. I've seen plenty of pictures. You all have seen the video at the very start. But the aesthetic only goes so far. It has to be backed up by quality of wine. Tony, before we dive into the three specific wines, again, I use Rioja as a reference point simply because I know many of my fellow South Africans will know a style of wine that can often have a certain breadth to it. It's wine that's often makes its presence felt quite quickly. Is there a particular thread that one would recognize in the broad style of the wines that you produce?
There's a nice phenomenon that it's related to the soil, but together with the proximity by the sea, and its acidity. So I think other winemakers that came to Priorat and they look at 15, 16 degrees wine and this type of ripeness, and they say, Tony, what are you doing to keep this acidity? And I say, no, this is Priorat. And I think when you talk about Priorat, it's about freshness at the same time that ripeness. And of course, then my style or any other winemaker style depends on the picking time. You pick earlier, you get a lighter style. You pick later, you get a more ripe, full body style. But the common thing amongst all winemakers in Priorat is this amazing acidity in low pH, which usually doesn't happen in a very ripe, hot, warm area like, most of the areas in Spain. And I would say the Mediterranean part of the Ebro River Valley, which is also connecting at the end, Rioja is the end part of the Ebro, and we are at the very beginning. So we are part of the same type of climate influence. But acidity in Priorat, you would blow your mind, like how this can be possible to get 17 degrees sometimes with a high acidity and low pH. And I think these two things to remember. So one is this balance between acidity and ripeness, and then second, it's more about the style. I like to get this very ripe style because I think this explains more about Priorat, explains more about the minerality. When a vine struggles a lot, when you're pushing the grapes to get ripe, at the very, very end, then the grapes also, they talk to you and they offer more, like, let's say, specific aromas related to this ripeness. But the common thing I would say is the acidity, freshness, and full body and ripe wines.
I must ask you very quickly, you mentioned alcohol and a number there snuck through. Your colleague Brian was chatting yesterday. I thought he must have been drinking for breakfast because he said something that clearly couldn't be right. He told me about a rosé at 17% alcohol that generally tastes like it's probably about 11 or 12%. Is that correct?
Yeah, in fact, it's not that it's this high alcohol. It's because it's also high acidity and it balances out very well. But then, of course, you get a full body rosé, which would be, if you compare in whites, I would say it's equivalent to a full body Viognier, for example, from Condrieu, for example. Not this type of very oily, creamy style, but then freshness and acidity. So if you compare this with the rosé, of course, it's not a Provence rosé because the climate is different. And if you want to make something like this, then you have many other amazing areas where you get amazing rosés. But this limited production of rosé just comes from the slate, so it gets the concentrations without the tannins. But the concentration means, again, it gets the alcohol, it gets the nice acidity, and also the creaminess and all this full body leaves that make the rosé like a winter red. I call it a winter red, like it's a rosé that you're not going to drink it in summer. You can drink it in summer, but you can drink it by the fire during Christmas, no problem. So it's this, I think I call it the soul of the red wine in Priorat. So this rosé, it's but it's true. It's when you talk about high alcohol, you're like, well, how can you make this high alcohol rosé? And I say, no, it's the point where it balances with this high acidity, and then it turns out into a very different style of rosé that everyone likes because they find it very like full body, and some people doesn't like the very fresh rosé. So in the market, there is we need to offer several products that can fit into everyone.
Something I love about this show, and what we're 8 years into Dan Really Likes Wine, speaking to winemakers and all the great winemakers, even though this is what they do all day, every day, making, producing, talking about, discussing wine, they're still so excited about doing it. And I absolutely love that. And Tony, you've clearly got that in spades. Before we finally jump into the tasting, and this wine is shouting out to me in an alluring Spanish accent to start trying it. Quickly, Sheri, on the production. If I'm not mistaken, the volumes that you guys get, I think here you talk about kilograms per square meter. Back in South Africa, we talk about the tonnage per hectare. It's not very high. I'd imagine that in turn means your prices are probably going to be a bit higher. How do you work around that? How do you get a message to market that this is why, and this is why if you're going to buy our wine, it's going to come with a certain price tag?
Yeah, and with the DOQ, Tony mentioned this at the beginning as well. We do have a lot of restrictions. We're allowed 1 kilo per 1 square meter for the production here, and then the liters is basically at 63% of each kilo. So it is very controlled. The land here, the elevation, it's very steep slopes. One of our vineyards, Pendens, is over a 40-degree slope. With that, everything is hand-picked, hand-sorted. Everything is very manual in the entire Priorat region. So with this, obviously, it's the prices are quite a bit higher due to that. We've got a lot of man-hours that go into the beauty of each bottle that Tony creates. And this obviously is part of that reason. So as Tony mentioned earlier as well, and I've got some of the licorelia here, this is what the plants grow in. And the plants will grow down anywhere between 30 to 40 meters deep. So you can imagine the terroir for the workers to be able to pick and do the work that they need to do in the fields is quite strenuous.
And needs to be washed down by a glass or two of wine, which is exactly what I'm going to start doing. Tony, we've got 3 wines here, which you very kindly sent up, and thank you for it. Wines produced, as Sheri illustrates, from some fairly uncompromising terrain, but as is so often the case, the tougher the terrain, the more the vines have to work, and the better the result. So here is our first wine. This is the Merit, and that is exactly why I picked it.
Yes.
It is going back to 2018. First of all, what's in the bottle?
Well, for Merit, it's a interesting concept because we do co-fermentation of several grapes. Because when you make wine, I'm sorry to say this, but you cannot pick every single grape when you want. So sometimes you have to pick. You need to start, some day, and then you get the chance to make a more fruity style because you're picking earlier, and then a more ripe style if you're picking later. So for Merit, what I do is a co-fermentation of Grenache, Carinena, and Syrah and Merlot. And mostly I do it because it's you cannot get everything ripe at the same time. So then I get some of the grapes are riper, the other ones are a bit greener, but they get more spicy flavors and even high acidity. So doing a co-fermentation, they all come together from the very beginning. And the particularity of this is that we mostly do not crush the berries. So we do entire berry fermentation, which is different than carbonic maceration. So I don't use the stems, but I use the entire berry. So it's I call it semi-carbonic. And also we do 2 years aging in stainless steel. So this will do some evolution. It will evolve nicely in stainless steel, but it will keep the fruitiness without having these strong tannins that you might have when you pick grapes a bit earlier in the season. So it's a nice type of wine that you would never do in a red, because in a red mostly you do, if the grapes are not green, then you do carbonic maceration, you get a lighter style, very aromatic, but then the wine lasts only for like 1 year or 2. But in this case, I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying to age the wine in stainless steel, like the Albarino only is very similar style, but in reds, which is not common. So I'm using some of the white wine techniques applied to red wine. And then it comes in this kind of very fruity, but you will see that it still keeps a lot of primary aromas, but at the same time in your mouth, it doesn't get these very rough tannins from the young reds, because the tannin has been evolved in stainless steel. And so that's mostly what Merit, and also Merit in Spain, it means deserve. And I think Merit, for me, the entry level, it deserves a lot, because it's the door when you come into a castle. No, it's, you've never been in a place. The first when you open the door is when it welcomes you to Perinet, and I think for me that's the concept behind that wine.
The door that leads you into the castle. I love that as a way of putting it. I mentioned earlier, winemakers have this excitement about wine, even though they do it so much. Winemakers, I also find, Tony, have a bit of the mad scientist to them. There is a desire to experiment and play around and discover. Talk me through the process which got you to deciding these techniques, and inspired by stuff you might often do with white wine rather than red, led you to producing this particular wine the way that you have.
Yeah, in fact, I combine, when grapes ripe, you can pick them into different stages. The first one, it only lasts for like 5 days, because, the vines, they make grapes, and grapes, they give you aromas, not because you're an amazing winemaker and you want to make wine. It's because they are trying to attract predators to come into the grapes, then pick a berry, and then spread the seeds away. So it's a biological mechanism that's happening into all plants, and apple trees, wherever the plants, they all do the same to attract these predators. So if you pick the grapes in this early stage, you get a lot of aromas. Then if the vine is kind of relaxing because they don't see the situation is getting more complicated, and then they go down the aromas and they last into the second pick. So what I do is I pick Syrah and Merlot. I do co-fermentation of Syrah Merlot at the very beginning, because Syrah Merlot are early ripening grapes. And then in a later stage, I pick it Garnacha and Carinena together. So it's 2 co-fermentations in 2 different stainless steel tanks. Always we base this on, you can see here, you can see this is late soil, and then you get concentration anyways. You get this concentration that's coming. It doesn't matter if it's Merlot, Syrah, Garnacha, or Carinena. That's why I'm working on entire berry fermentation, because in this case, I don't want to extract a lot, because I want to promote the aromas, and I want to promote the spiciness and freshness. So then after fermentation, which fermentation is short, because imagine in Priorat, you don't really need to do a lot of maceration, because you get so many concentration that in a week, the wine is already finished. Then I blend it back, both co-fermentations, and then in these stainless steel tanks that you can see, mostly Merit is made in the bigger ones, always keeping temperature under control to keep these primary aromas. And then I start moving the lees, no? The lees, of course, when the yeasts, they die, by autolysis, they release into the wine a lot of polysaccharides, a lot of proteins, everything that's contained in the plasmatic membrane of the yeast, so that then it's being released. And I don't like to throw this away. I like to keep it there to give it more, a little bit more of body, and it gives more nice velvety style. And basically then malolactic happens also in stainless steel. So this wine doesn't really move a lot. It goes there, then we do a couple of rackings to clean a little bit, to avoid too much lees. When you leave a lot of lees, the big lees, then they smell like rotten eggs. So we try to avoid this, and we keep only the fine lees into the tank. And then we keep this moving the lees in the stainless steel for a couple of years. And there's no more than that. It's more on the black, red fruit aromas, and then it keeps the acidity, as I told you. It's not, I think I'm not even, it's the wine itself that it's easy to make, and you just need to transfer the wine here and there and a little bit. But this wine is, it happens, it flows, and it tells you, for me, without aging in barrel, this wine tells you more about the soil. The naked, it's a naked wine. It tells you more. It's very naive, and there's nothing interfering on that. So then you get this very, of course, floral and fruity aromas, but then you get some hints of minerality, and it shows up a lot of information about the vintage. But then there's no that the barrel doesn't interfere into this wine. But at the same time, you can age it, and in bottle you can drink it after 5 years, no problem, because the wine still lasts. It's not a wine that you need to hurry to drink it earlier. No, don't be stressed. Priorat wines are always lasting, very nice, long term in bottle, even if they are young reds.
To make a wine like this and not opt for a barrel is again the mark of a winemaker who's clearly spent a lot of time thinking about exactly what he wants to get out of this wine. Sheri, this I'd imagine does make your job quite a lot easier when you're able to introduce your entry-level wine. And I say that not thinking that is anywhere near the right term, but it is the first wine in the queue because you've got something that certainly is very approachable, and that's what you want, but it's still got a depth to it, and it's still got so much more to it than you might expect from here's a wine, red, that hasn't been in barrel, that's starting at the bottom tier of what we do. It's not really what I was expecting, to be honest, and very happily so.
Yeah, and actually I opened a bottle last weekend of the 2016 and it's aging beautifully. So you would expect that from obviously a wine that's aged in barrel, but this is, with the stainless steel, with the freshness, it's still got that nice fruitiness, and exactly how Tony mentioned with, picking those berries early, you've got the taste of raspberry and nice red fruits there. So it's a great wine for us to sell. We sell it quite the volume here locally as well as export throughout US, Canada, and globally.
It's such a fascinating way of putting it together, that co-fermentation. And again, you've got those two sides to the story, that lovely soft red fruit, but there is still some body and some bulk to it, which the Bordeaux varietals bring into it. So a great start. Our first date is going particularly well so far, Tony. Let's see how it moves on, because wine number 2, this is a bottle with a little more heft to it. This is more the wine bottler's murder weapon kind of category. So I'm expecting a wine that's got a slightly bigger set of shoulders to it. This goes back to 2016. Simply says Priorat DOQ on the front. Once again, what am I drinking?
Well, in this case, I wanted to make a wine that recreates the percentage of the grapes that it's planted in our vineyard. So then our core vineyard, where the winery was built, it has a percentage of Garnacha, Carinena, and even Cabernet, because, it's like you can compare this with what it used to be in former times, like a Super Tuscan. When I first started in Priorat, most of the Garnachas and Carinenas were not really highlighted. People really thought that adding some Cab or some Syrah into a blend, it would make our local grapes taste better. And I still keep the tradition in this way of blending, but also because I realized that Cabernet does very well, and it's been very well adapted to the Priorat mesoclimate, and then it does not bring these bell pepper aromas or this greenish style, and then it becomes into more like licorice, this black fruit, so then I thought, well, why not then having the Cabernet aged in barrel, and then I decided to make this blend that represents us as a state, because we don't buy fruit, it's all our own state fruit. And this I want to honor also, because in Spain we've been introducing French varietals that I love, and I'm very fan of Cabernet, and I thought, why not creating a wine that's based on local grapes, but why cannot they go together? And I think they pair very well together, and I think that's why I created this wine. So this wine has been aging in oak, in nice oak, very fine grain oak. So it does quite a lot of long aging, between 18 and 24 months. But this type of high-end oak, it's very delicate also. So it really polishes, and it really brings this very, very velvety, smooth tannins. But again, keeping the acidity as a backbone. And then for me, this represents the state, and rather than the Priorat, because the state is the story of a place, and this was planted like this because the history, it is what it is. We don't want to just now say that Cabernet is a horrible grape, because it's not. And if Cabernet has been adapted well to Priorat, it's for some reasons. And I like to promote when some grape, they taste nice and amazing, I like to use them in blends. So for us, this is our estate. Remember, we are in the north of Priorat, so we grow Cabernet in quite high altitude, which also brings a very interesting profile into this wine. And you can see in this map, you get this, we mostly are in the brown circle, which is in the north. And this is where our Perinet estate is, and this is where this wine is made. Then we get different areas in Priorat. The red circle is more the hotter spot, and the blue one is the more maritime influence grapes. So these are grapes that's growing closer to the sea. But in this case, Perinet grows in higher and cooler locations. Yes, exactly. This is the estate. This is our estate. You see the winery. So everything around the winery is where Carinena, Garnacha grows on top of the terrace, and at the bottom there is a little bit of Syrah and the Cabernet. The Cabernet is facing north, which also, because Cabernet is very sensible to heat. So also to keep the freshness and spiciness, it needs to be north. But north in a warm climate like we have in Priorat, it's the perfect combination. So I would compare it with a Pauillac or Medoc Cabernet, but of course not in a Mediterranean, not in an Atlantic climate, not in a maritime, but in a more Mediterranean style. This is also Masbell. This is also a very nice south. From this one, we make a single vineyard Grenache also. And again, this is a very powerful, very ripe Grenache that also it's part of our portfolio.
I imagine if I look to our South African equivalent, if we're growing Cabernet Sauvignon in a slightly higher, slightly cooler space, it allows you a little more ripening, often leads to a slow ripening period, but leads to a wine that's a little more elegant. And I think that explains in some ways the blend that you have come up with, that you gravitated towards. I get the sense from a combination of experience, but a bit of a hunch, a bit of a thought that, you know what, I think this could work out pretty well. When you got to the finished product first time around, how pleasantly surprised were you at just how well it had worked out?
See, no, reality is that when you get different experiences from different places and looking how grapes adapt to different places of the world, then you come up into this. In fact, Priorat, it brings together different places of the world together, so I've been growing different grapes in different parts of the world, but then you get in Priorat and you say, wow, this north facing, reminds me to the area in Gimlet Gravels in New Zealand, and then at the same time you get a Grenache south, it reminds you to Banyuls, south of France, so Priorat for me, it puts together different climates of the world because the orography, and that's why I think when you have experience in making wine out of different grapes in different parts of the world, and you go to Priorat, like, wow, this is all in one. And that's why sometimes when you look at a Priorat blend or a Priorat wine, you need to come here to really understand what's going on, and it's crazy. And maybe another Cabernet south facing doesn't work in the same mountain, the same slope. And that's what it is. And then with that, you can make a different style. But to make this type of state wines is also complicated, because the state wine, it represents also this group of different climates of the world in one. And that's what you have, because the state is the state. You're not going to move the state. And that's why for me this represents a lot, because making a state wine, it might look easier, but it's more difficult because you cannot move from that. And it just changes the climatology and maybe some techniques that you use. But instead, when you do blends from different vineyards and then you buy grapes, then you can adjust much more. But estate wines they have a very strong personality. And if you're lucky that a estate wine brings up into the table a really nice personality, then you realize that it's worth doing something like this.
Sheri, in the history of winemaking, there's not always the smoothest relationship between winemakers and the people who control the books on the other side. And when you've got wild and creative winemakers who want to do all sorts of exciting things, it can occasionally create a slight difference of opinion. You've obviously got a winemaker who's not only very good at what he does, but has this flair of imagination and approach. How does that work with you and Antoni as a team? And I'm guessing you probably quite like this aspect of it, because you've got somebody who I'd imagine is constantly surprising you with a very inventive and fun approach to winemaking.
Well, and I think that's the incredible thing with Tony, is he's got that creativity, and he's an incredible winemaker. The great thing is we've got such a great partnership. So we work very closely together, and being able to run this business together and run Perinet, and really to grow this winery and grow this brand. So he's fantastic. And there's, as you say, from a finance perspective, et cetera, there's no worries here. So it's great.
It's lovely to see a team in action there. We've got one more wine to have a quick check at, and this one I'm particularly interested in, the Viña Pendents. I probably got that pronounced horribly, but again, from this wonderful area that is Priorat. Third wine out of 3. What are you dazzling with me for number 3 here, Tony?
Well, your pronunciation was very good, in fact, because it's not, no. In fact, this was there's a crazy story behind this, because when I started at working at Perinet, I was told, like, Tony, we're going to sell this vineyard. It's too far away. It's too far away from the winery. It's like, well, what are you talking about? I mean, Carinena is going to be, in the future, is going to be the best companion for Garnacha. So you can see in the picture how steep is that. Like, this is more than 40 degrees slope in the town of Porrera. Porrera, for you to know, it's the town that's closer to the Mediterranean Sea. So it gets more humidity, it gets more maritime influence, and a little bit less diurnal range. So, but this combination together with the soil, which the soil is similar in different parts of Priorat, even if there is tiny differences between the different types of slate, but then it gets that fresh style of the Carinena, but at the same time very ripe. Carinena in Spain has been completely treated like horrible, because it's the black swan of Spain. Only use Carinena for blends, for low end wines. But then it's true that once the technique has been improved in Spain, and this comes after the 50s, because Spain was mostly based on cooperatives and low quality, because most of the materials, we got no stainless steel, we got no cleanliness in the wineries, 50 years ago. But now, once you bring onto the table the technology to make clean wines, then it's crazy, because you can make wine from a very, very minority grape, something that used to be very bad in the past. Now it comes into the scenario like a clean, and then you're discovering that some grapes like Carinena, they taste great. And it's like, when I came to Priorat, I was told, no, Carinena just for blends. And it's like, well, why not? It's like, so then in this case, it's coming from Porrera, more maritime, less diurnal range, but Carinena needs to grow very close to the sea. Carinena needs constant humidity. I know it's very sensible to oidium or, powdery mildew, but it's a grape that needs to be very close to the humidity, and not huge humidity, but constant humidity. Carinena will never grow in high altitude, very dry environments, or it will not develop as well as it does it here. So then I thought, well, let's make a Carinena, see how it works. And then it went really, really interesting from the beginning, because I was expecting this rustic, smelly aromas, rotten eggs aromas, very reductive grapes. And then suddenly I said, wow, maybe if we treat Carinena well, if you use the nice techniques, maybe this is not going to be such a horrible grape that I was told Carinena would be. So then that's why I got this challenge of trying to make a nice Carinena. And this is also a limited edition. It's a single vineyard, single varietal. And now I think Carinena, it's coming up into the market. Now you can find very nice Carinenas coming from Priorat, apart from Garnacha. But Garnacha, let's say it's easier. That's why Garnacha spread out in different parts of the world, making rosés, making full ready Grenache, making a spicy Côte Rôtie or Côte du Rhône. All this is really interesting. But then Carinena, which is also very limited, and it's not even being planted in the world, it's very, for us, it's our home varietal, even if it originated in the province of Aragon, in the Comunidad Autónoma de Aragón. But for us, it does very well with Garnacha, because Carinena has high acidity, it's more shy, but it has a lot of color, a little bit less of alcohol, and then it pairs very well with Garnacha. And this, Garnacha, technically we call it isohydric grape, and Carinena an isohydric grape, which means Garnacha can keep the stomata closed, so they can keep the water inside when it's really hot, but at the same time, Carinena cannot. That's why Carinena needs constant humidity, because Carinena has not the ability to protect from heat waves as Carinena does. As Garnacha does. So for me, this is more a viticultural approach, a learning process, and all this. Plus, it turns into a very delicate, ripe, prune, these blackberry aromas with amazing acidity, again, salinity, chalkiness, and telling you that Carinena does very best results when it's closer to the sea. So it's more than that. It's more than a wine. This is, for me, it's another level of understanding Carinena technically and as a vine itself. Then the winemaking, we use more or less the same techniques, but understanding the grapes, it's completely a different level than making wine out of grapes. So that's a little bit, sorry for all these technical words, but I think Carinena, it's a challenge for all winemakers.
Well, it's not a wine we see much of in South Africa. We know it as Carignan, and you might have tried some Lausanne, perhaps, or some of the mentors from KWV. It's the perfect wine to finish with, Tony, because it's clearly one that you're so passionate about. And there are echoes of something like Chenin Blanc in South Africa, which wasn't always a grape that people thought they could make anything premium from. And that's changed dramatically. You've obviously done the same thing here. Sadly, we're running towards the end of what's been a fascinating show, three of you, and some absolutely lovely wine. I must ask you very quickly, Tony, before I get Sheri to wrap up for us, the South African influence. We've had a few South Africans head your way, including, if I'm not mistaken, a rather well-known gentleman by the name of Ibn Sadi.
Yes. In fact, I met him in 2003, 2004. And I think it's true that Priorat is an area with all young winemakers, because, the area was completely abandoned. And then the young generations coming to Priorat are always very open to this. And that's why I was very young, and I moved from cows to wine and came to Priorat, and then met Evan, and then, it's like, wow, this is so intense. Like, it's South African people here, like, what's going on? And then that's why you feel attracted by this new way, and you can see that there is more to do, there's more to listen, there's more to make here in Priorat. And it's, and people coming with new techniques and then bringing new ideas. And that's why, I think for me, knowing these people were something like, someone from so far away is coming to Priorat, which I never heard of that. And I'm Catalan. I never heard of Priorat. It's like, wow, I think there's something we can do here. So better we stay, better we make wine here and see what's happening.
All right. Well, a few South Africans have made their way to make wine. I'm sure there's been the occasional South African tourist. Hopefully out of today, there'll be a few more drinking the wine of Perinet when we get it to South Africa, which I think we need to do, but also making their way over. Sheri, just in wrapping up, and it's been a delight chatting to both of you, a word of encouragement for wine drinkers around the world to find their way over to Perinet and to come and enjoy both your wine and your hospitality.
Well, I think you see the passion in Tony right there in himself. It's incredible. He's passionate in the wine that he makes, especially this Pendants that you just tried. That's by far my favorite wine. And actually, recently we were honored, and Tony was honored, and the team with the achievement with Wine Spectator. It was rated one of the top wines in Spain in an edition last year. So we're very proud of that. We welcome everyone to the winery. We've got a state-of-the-art, Gaudi-inspired barrel room, lovely wines, beautiful terrace overlooking the Monsan mountain range. It's absolutely spectacular. So we welcome all of you to come and visit. And Dan, I hope you'll be able to come and visit for an anniversary and celebrate where you met your lovely wife in Barcelona.
She's put up with me for almost 15 years. I think she deserves reward of some sort or another. Guys, thank you. You've done so much today. You've opened up my eyes, let alone the eyes of many watching, I'm sure, to a part of Spain that's not well known, certainly to a South African audience. Tony, you've introduced me to some delightful wine. If you told me beforehand you were giving me a 6-year-old red wine that hadn't seen the inside of a barrel, I would have laughed and then politely declined and said I had something else to do. And the love of Carignan, the fact that you've taken this grape and given it this new lease of life, is the kind of fairy tale that I absolutely adore. So thank you both. The wine is fabulous, and that's not unsurprising at all. But what's been really cool is discovering a bit more of a little slice of this wine world. It's full of so many hidden treasures, and yours is certainly for me one of them. But it is now known, and I shall be coming your way. I am coming to visit. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you.
I need to go and jump into a tuxedo. It is time for the Laureus World Sports Awards in Madrid. Make sure you're watching them from 8 o'clock South African time tonight, or catch up later if you miss them. And I might just have another glass or two of wine and ask them if they've got any Perinet behind the bar. Big thank you for joining us. We play out with another look at this great, great winery. Gee, it looks lovely. I'll be there soon. Until then, I shall watch with a glass of wine in hand and raise that both to our Laureus champions this evening, but also to the team at Perinet, as well as Brian, for giving us such a lovely introduction to a delightful, delightful winery. Have a great evening. We'll see you back live next Monday and the magazine show this coming Thursday. Until then, happy drinking. Goodbye.
I'm very excited to present the features of an exceptional wine, the Gran Reserva blend. One of the most difficult challenges as a winemaker. The wine puts together both the knowledge of terroir and the secrets of Priorat. It's made from a historic Priorat vineyard overlooking the castle of Siurana, a wine that expresses the legend of the last Moorish queen, Abdelaziz. This noble woman understood that the assault had just taken place by Christians, so, enveloped in panic, she preferred to cast herself off the cliff with a blindfolded horse. So it's a legend that speaks of pride and courage to preserve honor and freedom. Perinet makes wine in a landscape of heroic viticulture. Vines are planted on the arid and rocky slopes, as you can see here. And also this kind of a slate, it's very easy to break, so then the roots can penetrate down and they can look for water, which give a unique juice that results in a wine that makes people travel to the ancient times. This is Perinet's barrel room. The Gran Reserva did an aging of 24 months in French oak, and it's going to be aging for 3 more years in bottle. The barrels to make this wine are from a more than 100 years old forest in the northeast of France. The Gran Reserva will get fruity aromas, which are extremely integrated with oak flavors, together with elegant nuances of flowers. Also, the tannins have been combining with one another to become exquisite in mouth, velvety and voluptuous. This wine will astonish your senses and make you feel a journey to the Priorat.